I'm obviously right. So why should I apologize? YouTube fam, it's your girl Gracesandra, and I'm back here at Out Here Trying to Survive, where I discuss all things Black womanhood, mental health advocacy, and abuse recovery, but specifically narcissistic and verbal abuse, which is what I went through. Today I'm going to be doing part 4 of my 4-part series on what is verbal abuse. Actually, it might extend to more than 4, but thank you so much for coming back. In part 1 I just talked about what it is in general. In part 2 I asked why do men abuse, and in part 3 I detailed each specific verbally abusive behavior. And in this one I am going to talk about the anger addict, what the anger addict is, what he does, and what you should do and not do when you're going through verbal abuse. Abusive anger is a category of verbal abuse. I want you to know that you are never, ever, ever responsible for being yelled at, snapped at, raged at, or anything else. No matter how demanding, accusing, or blaming your abuser is, it is not your fault, sis. The biggest revelation for me was learning that if it's not my fault, then I in no way need to explain myself. And I just want to make that very clear to you, because if you're in a verbally abusive relationship, you know that you've been trying to explain yourself to no end, and it doesn't matter how you try to explain yourself, the fighting intensifies. And if you're in a verbally abusive relationship, you know that all the explaining in the world has never had your abuser say to you,
"Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to yell at you. You know what, I was being snippy. I'm sorry, will you forgive me? I just lapsed of judgment."
I am in a healthy partnership now, and I'll never forget the first time when I said to my partner, you know, I really didn't like your tone. And I was actually scared to do that because he's the first person I've been with since my abusive ex. It was so crazy. He was just like,
"Oh, I'm so sorry. I wasn't trying to communicate that. I didn't even know I had a tone."
He just really was like,
"I'm sorry." You know,
he was really calm too, like,
"Oh my goodness, I'll be really careful of that."
And he has been for all this time. He's been consistently careful and hasn't used a tone with me, except for I think one time when he was really mad. And well, anyway, long story, he's been very healthy in his response. But I was so conditioned when I was with my ex that I would explain myself sometimes for hours and never, ever, ever receive an apology. That is part of anger addiction, their commitment to stay angry. Just to be clear, because I want y'all to know, there is no way that you can prevent a verbally abusive partner from venting on you or raging at you or glaring at you. There's no way that you can be, because I know the abuser has said to you or will say to you,
"If you were just like this, or if you were like so-and-so, or if you would just calm down, or if you would stop being so emotional, or if you would this or that."
They're giving you ways that you should be to prevent them from abusing you. Sis, there is no way that you can be to prevent that. It is not your fault. It is not your fault. The chances are you're already trying to be more supportive and caring and kind and loving and thoughtful, and you're already practicing how to speak to them, how to say what you're upset about. I used to actually sit in my car for 20 or 30 minutes and practice how I was going to say something to my ex just to prevent abuse. And you know what? It never worked, but I still felt like I had to do it every time, like I was conditioned, and it just creates such an atmosphere of powerlessness. That dynamic is verbal abuse. It's a function of anger addiction. Again, when the abuser is committed to being angry at you for everything that you do and say and who you are. I talked a little bit about this in video 2, part 2 of this series, about how you are, when you're being verbally abused or physically abused, you are the dream woman, the fantasy woman, the woman who knows everything that's in his head, the woman who knows everything and caters to him completely. That's his reality. And your reality is that you're a normal person, that he don't know what's in your head, you don't know what is in his head, you just trying to function and live life like a normal person, okay? But an anger addict, of an abusive man, I'm just saying men because that's what my channel is about and that's what I experienced, but anyway, but an abusive man who's an anger addict thinks that you're living in his reality where you're the dream woman. And so in that reality, on a subconscious level, he's thinking,
"She should know what's in my head. She should know what I'm thinking. She should know what I want."
That means that everything that happens in his reality is going to be blamed on you. It doesn't matter what you say or do. Sis, let me hammer that home. It doesn't matter what you say or do. If he's in his reality where you're his dream woman, his fantasy woman, there will be no understanding and you will get blamed for his behavior every goddamn time. With emphasis, so y'all get this. A lot of verbal abusers are filled with a deep sense of dread and inner tension about their life, usually the trauma they experienced growing up, and this comes out in angry outbursts. For my ex, it was like it came out in every way. It came out all the time, and it it was very unpredictable. And that's what leads to complex PTSD. That's another subject for another day. But his anger addiction was so strong. I was scared about everything. I was just telling my partner the other day that when my ex and I first got together, it wasn't about within 3 months or 4 months, we took a trip down to see his family down south. And I was already afraid to ask him to adjust the air conditioner because I just was so like, I don't know if this is going to make him angry or not. It might make him angry. It might not. And I was already feeling that fear of he gets angry about everything. We had only been together 3 months. And so it's hard for me to look back on that and be like, Grace, what the hell were you thinking? Like, why didn't you see that as a big giant ass red flag? That's a whole nother thing about my vulnerability and how I was not yet prepared to love myself and demand boundaries and demand good things for myself. But now I can look back and I would never allow that to happen to me ever again. When you're being verbally abused by an anger addict, like I said, it's very unpredictable. It's not like it's every Sunday morning and then Tuesday night and then Friday morning and then Saturday night. Because if that were the case, you would know what to expect. Maybe you'd avoid them. You wouldn't have to walk on eggshells because you'd know when it was coming. But it's very unpredictable. And the intensity of it is really unpredictable. You know, if your partner uses drugs or alcohol, that may also affect it. There might be some predictability in that. But even still, you just never know. And so when the abuser abuses with this unpredictability, it catches you off guard, and that gives them a sense of euphoria, and it gives them a sense of reward. And it's a very, very strong lack of empathy. And something that I think hurt me so much when I was being abused was that I felt so dehumanized. And I think a lot of people who haven't been through this don't quite understand that when you see someone looking at you, knowing they're causing you intense pain, there were times I actually begged him to stop. Like I would be crying and asking him to stop, to please stop, because it hurt so much. And all I could do was think to say is like, just please stop speaking because your words are harming me. But I could be crying, laid out, crying, asking him to stop, heaving. There came to a point in our relationship where my heart started aching and I would be going like this and heaving and asking him to please stop verbally assaulting me, essentially, and have him look at me and be like, with this mean ass face, like this just mean ass face, like this, you know, shaking his head, smacking his lips, kind of like, look at your pathetic ass. The dehumanization of that process is so deep. It's so thorough. It's so painful to think that produced euphoric rewards for him where he didn't even care. You know, there were times he didn't reach out and touch me or hug me or comfort me or anything when I was going through that. He would just go stone cold. And I could tell that he got off on it a little bit. It's what makes verbal abuse so painful. For my ex, he could take quite a long time before he would come back around to the honeymoon stage and be nice to me again. And that separation time felt like death to me because I was so trauma bonded. Y'all, it's verbal abuse is so ugly. But because they've waited so long, so perhaps they've waited 2 weeks, 3 weeks, 4 weeks. For my ex, he could not go longer than 3 or 4 months without a huge anger outburst. If it got to be around the 3 to 4 month mark, I knew shit was about to go down. Like he could not go that long. So it produces like this huge sense of euphoria for them when they finally like let all this anger build up and then it comes out. But then the stress that it causes for you as a victim is so intense because you have no idea when the next one is coming, but you know it's coming at some point. So the only thing left to do to cause yourself peace is to create reasons why it's your fault. To think of things you might be doing or saying to look for help. You might have found this video because you went to Google like, what the hell am I experiencing? I don't know what I'm experiencing. It took me 9 or 10 months and I still didn't Google what is verbal abuse? How do I get through verbal abuse? Am I being verbally abused? I had no idea what the fuck that was. All I knew was like, I'm in tremendous ass pain and I don't know how to deal with this shit, and I just started Googling everything. But the only thing I could think of was emotional abuse, and then that led me to the verbal abuse, which led me to realize I am being so severely fucking verbally abused that I am literally, my adrenal system is getting fucked up. Another thing about anger addicts who are verbally abusive is that anger addicts are often irrational, and their arguments that a lot of times don't make sense. They're giving you a lot of word salad, and then they're also telling you things that they themselves are doing that they're accusing you of. So for example, my ex, when he was at the worst, he would often accusing me of not making sense. And I'm telling y'all, I would be listening to him talk when he was angry and it just made no fucking sense. But he would be accusing me of that. He was completely irrational about things that were just so obvious to me as a normal, intelligent woman, that he would say that I would just be like, come on. It got to the point for me at the end where he would say things that were so irrational and unintelligent. I just knew right away, like, he's on his bullshit. Don't even try to take it seriously. But in the beginning, when he would get on his anger addict outburst bullshit, I would actually be literally trying to think about what he's saying and like, how does that make sense? Does this make sense? And am I crazy? Am I the one who's just doesn't get it? And I'd be Googling and looking at books and asking people and things like that. He was arguing about stuff that was very near and dear to me, about politics, about race and ethnicity as Black folks, because we're both Black, things that he was saying that were misogynistic and that were actually practicing misogynoir against Black women. And I would be trying to figure out, like, is he making any sense? Have I seen this wrong? Towards the end, I realized this is all irrational bullshit. And it actually calmed me. What I want you to know about that is when you're being verbally abused and your partner starts on this free-floating ass bullshit, just know those are meant to take you off balance. It's not to make sense. It's not to prove anything. It's just meant to knock you off balance, sis. Don't fall for it. When you get knocked off balance, it affects your equilibrium, okay? It affects your mind. It affects your ability to rationalize, to reason. And then you come off as crazy. Then you're starting to get angry and you're just like trying to respond. And I found that the literal best way to deal with it is to rehearse the truths to myself, to get away from him as quickly as possible when he was talking crazy, and then to rehearse to myself what the truth is about who I am. The truth is about what's reality. The truth is, for me, it was that Black women are beautiful and we're amazing and we're kind and we're not all the bad things that he was saying about us. But when you take that approach, it still has traumatic effects in your body, like an earthquake. The aftermath of an earthquake, you still feel those tremors. It still messes with you. It's still very serious. So while I'm saying like there's things that you can do to get through that moment when you're dealing with an anger addict, at the same time it's still really serious and it's still messing with you, and the best thing to do is still to leave. But if you're just in the beginning of this whole big giant ass web of verbal abuse and trying to figure it out, it's really hard to figure out what to do in the moment. But what I don't want you to do is believe any of his lies. Verbal abuse is all lies. The one thing I can say is that verbal abusers always want a reaction. They want you to go nuts. They want you to go crazy. It gives them supply. Like narcissistic supply, it gives them supply when you do that. So if you show signs that you're losing enthusiasm to give him his supply, then he's gonna ramp it up. This process is one of the reasons that verbal abuse increases over time. And for me, from the first time I realized that I was being verbally abused, it was the fall of 2016. So it was like September, October of 2016. And it became the absolute worst while I was trying to move out. And that was in early spring of 2019. So like over the course of those years, I became so traumatized trying to fix him and trying to live with him while his verbal abuse was getting better, but he was able to go longer in between. So, but then when it did happen, it was all the more crushing, and I was becoming more and more traumatized, so that by the time he moved out, which was September 1st of 2019, I was a shell, just half a human, just heartbroken shell of a mess of a person. Ugh. So over time, what I don't want you to ever think is, I must be doing something wrong. Let me try to fix this. And then the more you try to fix it, the more your abuser is going to acclimate. And that's why verbal abuse actually increases over time, because you keep trying to fix yourself and fix things, and you keep acclimating, and your boundaries get more and more. Actually, you probably don't have any boundaries left, but any boundaries you might have had, you're just decimating yourself, making yourself smaller so that your abuser can continue to get the euphoric fix. He's got to increase it in order to get more, kind of like a drug addict, but he's an anger addict. As long as your partner keeps blaming you for what you're experiencing for his abuse, you will never, ever get a sincere apology, because a sincere apology would be him having to realize and recognize what he's done to you and stop that behavior. As long as he can keep pile driving it on you, almost to the point of ridiculousness. My ex came up with the most ridiculous reasons for why he was abusing me. He never had to face it until he decided to, and while we were together, he did not decide to. He tried to, but I don't think he was actually at a place where he was ready to actually do what he would need to do to stop being verbally abusive. And that's okay. That's his journey. I have my journey. We've both learned a lot. I am practicing forgiveness and letting it go. And part of the reason they do that is because when they're in this other reality of like you're their fantasy woman, dream woman, the idea to them is, well, I'm right. I'm obviously right. So why should I apologize to her? Doesn't really matter that you are feeling hurt and traumatized and have complex PTSD. They're right. You know, for me in like a normal reality and how I approached my ex, it was like, even if I'm not right, but I'm hurting him, I'm gonna apologize. Because I would never want my partner to be hurt, whether I'm right or wrong or whatever. You know, that's how I operate right now too. Like with my current partner who I'm very happy with and I feel very loved and I love him so much. Anyway, in that relationship now, like it doesn't matter if I'm right. If he communicates to me like something you're saying or doing is harming me, I'm automatically going to be like, what is it? Let me address it. Let me apologize. Let me work to fix it because I never want you to feel that way. He makes me feel like that way too. But with my ex, nope. I did not get that. In wrapping up this video, I want to give you just a few signs of abusive anger and what that looks like. Number 1, a lack of warmth from your partner. Irritable outbursts, sneering at you, argumentativeness in general, all out temper tantrums on the level that they seem like they're a 3-year-old or a 6-year-old, which internally that is what's happening on a subconscious level. Yelling at you, shouting at you, often for irrational reasons. Complete and utter rage and explosiveness. A sense of pervading sarcasm, making jokes at your expense, making jokes at vulnerable people, making jokes about people less fortunate, and just an all-around sense of sarcasm. If you're with a man who's doing any of these things, you should consider that you're probably with an anger addict, especially if they're doing these behaviors consistently. There's a guy named Robert Brownbridge who said, sarcasm is the tip of the iceberg which conceals a mountain of anger. Whew. Lord, my ex, we first got together and I first like went through his social media just trying to see. That was something I actually noticed about him and overlooked. It did not strike me too much as a red flag. Again, I didn't know what I didn't know. Please forgive me. He had so much sarcastic stuff about so many people and so much like bullying stuff and so much making fun of people and memes that were taken of women who looked very vulnerable. I'll just say that, who weren't at their best. And it was like, you know, memes that make fun of them. And obviously there were pictures that were taken and shared without consent. I'm very, very big on consent as a victim of sexual abuse and rape, and just as a woman and as a black woman and as a black woman raising a black daughter. I am very, very big on consent. And I remember like later in our relationship being like, you're posting this stuff that's really troubling. Do you think these people are giving their consent to have their picture taken on the low and then put on the internet for everyone to laugh at? And he'd be like,
oh, it's just a joke. Hey, you don't have no sense of humor. It's just a joke. Da 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 da.
But as we know, what I found was that all of that sarcasm and joking and all of that bullying online behavior just concealed mountains and like damn snow peaks full of anger. I would have never really made those connections. So I'm sharing that with you right now to hopefully make those connections for you if you're with someone who bullies people online or who makes jokes or who defends making jokes about whoever is most vulnerable in the world. So the final thing I just want to say in this video is if you're dealing with someone who's constantly irritable and you don't know why they're irritable and there's nothing you can do that actually helps, maybe consider that you're with an anger addict. What's really scary about anger addicts and verbal abusers in general, narcissistic abusers, is that this can all be very covert as well. You know, I have often told the story about how I was narcissistically and verbally abused, and it was covert, right? Because nobody knew about it. If I hadn't ever told anybody, nobody would have saw it or noticed it when we were around other people. They wouldn't even have noticed how mean he was to me. Although later on, I did have some people say it was very obvious to me when I was around y'all that he was so mean to you. And I was like, really? Oh my God, I had no idea. But anyway, so there's a covert level of that, right? Because I didn't have the bruises and I didn't have the marks and I didn't have anything to prove I was being abused. But then there's even another level of covert, emotional, psychological, narcissistic, verbal batterers where they are even more covert, and it's not big ragey yelling, and it's not big like you bitch this, and it's not all these mountains and mountains of verbally abusive behaviors where it's more like long range plans to take apart a human being, to literally take apart and decimate. It's like the long con. I'm not a thief, but I've watched enough Ocean's 11 and all that stuff. The long con as opposed to a short taking down, like what my ex-husband, my ex-abusive husband did was like immediate full force verbal abuse, psychological abuse, emotional torment. Like it was like boom, 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 boom for like almost 5 years. Whereas a more covert abuser will take like a long stretch of time. There are some women in some of these support groups I'm in who have said like they were married to somebody for 10 years and something was off. Something was like bad. It hurt, but it was like so just like maybe I'm being nitpicky. And then after 10 years, they completely just turn into this violent rage machine. And it was like, oh my God, like this is who I've been married to this whole time. And there was only like snippets of it. There's different kinds of abusers. And basically what I'm trying to say is please protect yourself. Please let me know if you have any questions. Again, feel free to reach out to me. Please leave your questions in the comments, or you can email me at outheretrynasurvive@gmail.com. I respond to every single email. If you would like to hire me for trauma-informed coaching, I am in the process of becoming a NLP and hypnosis practitioner, but I am already trained as a trauma-informed life coach. So if you want to hire me, go to my website, outheretrynasurvive.com, and just click on the button for a free discovery call. I have a whole schedule laid out, and just pick your spot and we'll have a free 50-minute session where I can ask you all sorts of questions and figure out if you're a good fit. So thank you so much again for watching and coming back. Please let me know if you want more on verbal abuse. I'm trying to figure out if I should do more or less on verbal abuse. It's something that's so near and dear to my heart because I experience it so severely, and I want other women to know what they're experiencing and to get the fuck out. I love y'all, YouTube fam, and I'll see y'all later. I really didn't like your tone. My cat. She's trying to walk on a... Can you leave me alone? Get out of here. Lord have mercy. Get out of here. I'll never forget the chances are... My cat again. The woman who knows everything he wants. The woman... Oh, my cat. She's interrupting me. Thing to my ex.